Hi, and welcome to another Bringing the Zoo to You. My name is Alex, and I work for the bird department here at Brookfield Zoo. We are currently in the Feathers and Scales building in our free flight cage over here, what we call our indoor flight cage, and we're attempting to see some of our birds here. So all the birds in this area are native to South America. Some of them stem up into Central America as well as Mexico. We have some bugs sitting over to see if some of our guys will come over and say hi, which is always nice to have. So most of the time when we keep flocks in large exhibits such as this, we tend to keep them in single-sex flocks. We've got typically around 10 species in this exhibit, so it does fluctuate some. Depending on the time of year, we will move some species from here or there into this exhibit. But those guys that you see climbing up right now, those are called red-capped cardinals. And we've got 6 females in here, all ladies. The reason for that is when you tend to have mixed gender groups in large numbers, no matter how much space you have, it increases the chances of potential conflict between the different birds. So a lot of the time when we have a lot of birds in one space, we tend to just keep one sex in one area. That doesn't mean that we all only have females in this building. We do have a couple of breeding pairs on exhibit. I saw jumping around there a little bit. We do have a pair of silver-beaked tanagers that are, looks like they hop back up. We'll see them again. Typically the male comes down. He's got a very, up there he is right there. That's a very bright beak. Silver-beaked tanager, we do have a breeding pair up there that made a wonderful nest all themselves and have raised chicks in this exhibit. They had 2 young boys that were just removed from the exhibit to make some space for the next breeding. So we do have a couple of breeding pairs in here, but it does tend to be single-sex flocks for the sake of peace. But that does allow us to keep quite a few birds in this large space. Managing so many birds, especially small birds in such a large area, can be fairly difficult. We take binoculars to the exhibit on a daily basis to make sure that we see as many of them as we can. But that doesn't mean that we see everybody on the regular. There are quite a few small birds in this area, and it isn't unusual to go a day or 2 without seeing everybody. But we do keep close track and make sure that they turn back up, whether they're hiding up in those upper branches or just don't feel like coming down to get up close and personal with these. You can see right there, that is the female silverbeak, that kind of dull brown bird that came down and just grabbed a waxworm. They're right next to each other, so you can see the 2 of them. That's a great example of a sexually dimorphic species. So a lot of the time with birds, we either have a sexually dimorphic or a monomorphic, which means essentially that the male and the female will either look identical in a monomorphic species, like those redcaps, a male redcap, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference at all. Or you have a dimorphic species, which means that they look significantly different between the boys and the girls. So with the silver beaks, it's only the males that tend to have those bright silver beaks. So it's easy enough to tell who's who with just having the one boy and the one girl in hand. Keeping track of everybody in here can be a little bit of a hassle. We do, in the mornings and for our primary feeding diet, we do use these trap cages to keep track of everybody. It is where we feed our primary diet, where they get a good mix of fruit and pellet on the daily basis, as well as some bugs, though I gave them a nice influx of bugs in the middle of the exhibit today. Most of the feeding does happen in that cage for the sake of us being able to catch these birds. We do have to be able to monitor their well-being. So twice a year we do catch up every bird, spaced out, of course, to make sure that they get a wellness check, they get a weight, to make sure that everybody's looking healthy and happy.
So you were saying how you can tell the males and the females apart for the silver-beaked tanagers just because there's one of each. Mm-hmm. So when you have a group of birds where there's maybe 4 or 5 birds, 4 or 5 females or 4 or 5 males, how do you tell those individual birds apart?
So everybody in here has a metal band in each foot, or a metal band on one foot and a plastic band on another. So it's a color coding system. It's easy enough with binoculars to be able to tell who's who, but when we have so many birds of the same species, it can be pretty difficult to tell them apart. Though some of them do have places that they tend to hang out. So I could tell you that if you're looking for the purple-banded red-capped cardinals, it tends to hang out on the guest area fairly often.
Okay, so they're kind of like the penguins then, as far as identification.
All of our animals have distinct personalities, have things that they tend to do. Sometimes when they're not doing what they tend to do, it's a little bit strange. We do have kind of creeping up, trying to not be totally shy, our pair of blue-billed curassows over here. So this is our other breeding pair that we have on this exhibit, trying to get our big brave boy to come up and say hi, but he's being a little bit timid today, and that's all right. So these are blue-billed curassows. They are the only guys in here that are actually critically endangered. They can only be found in the country Colombia. A lot of the time that in those areas there's a lot of deforestation happening. There's a lot of demand for the wood coming from the Amazon and similar rainforests in northern South America. And these guys, being large ground birds, see a lot of issues with both hunters as well as just with lack of habitat to be able to stay safe and raise their young. So we actually have a lovely nest site if you want to, as they're thinking about maybe coming over. We do have a basket up in that tree up there. That is where we've had these guys lay a couple of eggs. Haven't had them successfully raise chicks yet, but we've made a lot of progress just in the last few years. You'll notice there's 2 baskets up there. That basket that's in the tree has actually been there for several years, and these guys hadn't really paid it much attention at all. They didn't really care until we built them a nice, pretty new post behind.
Yeah.
Sometimes they can be fickle, but I guess they like to have the option. So it's interesting to see these guys as they operate. Like I said, they are largely threatened out in the wild.
Why do they twitch their heads back and forth?
It's a little, I like to think of it as sort of like calibrating. So a lot of the times when you look at these birds, especially larger birds like that, they have their eyes on the sides of their heads to be able to keep an eye out for predators. And these guys, although I can get pretty close up to them and not have them freak out on the regular, they do stay cautious and are always aware that, you know, they would rather keep their space from us. So that's just sort of their way of like registering where we are. Especially when you get up close to them, you see them sort of like twitch their heads an awful lot, and that's their way of trying to get a good focus on you and make sure that you're not coming up too close to them.
I'm kind of sad that they didn't want to show us their beautiful feathers on top of their head. So they're already gone, but what are those fancy feathers up on top of the curassow's head for?
So the like the curly cues on the top?
Yeah.
More than anything, it's a little bit of a display, but it's definitely just sort of a trait for these guys. They're actually
there they are.
Sort of close relatives to, they're in the same order as chickens and turkeys. So all those ground birds are all galliform. And are you going to come over? No. No, I'll wait. I'll eat all the fruit that you left for me afterwards. But you can see that these guys are also sexually dimorphic. So the male has a little bit more of like that kind of like turkey gobbler, a little bit more blue as he's walking over there. Whereas the female, as she's kind of waltzing around in the background, she doesn't really have much of that gobble. But she still has the blue bill, hence the name blue-billed curassow.
So can you tell us who's up in the top of this tree here with that really big bill?
Let's see. Oh, there's the Aviary. I was wondering if she was going to come back. So that's our curl-crested Aviary. Aviaries are cousins to the toucan, so they have that same sort of large snoot that they use to eat fruit and get food out of crevices where they need to in the wild. Something kind of neat about them, so we just have the one female in here. We do breed them elsewhere, just not on exhibit. They kind of do better with a little bit more privacy for that sort of thing. But when Aviaries and birds and their family go to sleep, they do tend to sleep with that long beak along their back. It's sort of like a protection sort of thing, kind of helps them lay low, keep out of trouble. So typically here, when the lights go out, you're hard pressed to be able to see her hiding up in the canopy, which is good for her. It's definitely a comfort thing. She wouldn't be able to sleep well if I could peek up and spot her on the regular.
So you mentioned that the curassows have fruit around this whole area for them to eat. What other things are you feeding the birds?
So these guys, the ones on the ground, those curassows, they in the wild will be eating a lot of insects, as well as just kind of scavenging on the forest floor. Sometimes crustaceans like crayfish. Here we have them on a kind of like a prepackaged diet that gives a lot of those nutrients that they'd be getting into it, as well as greens. And then when we mix it up with them, we do give them various types of fruit. These guys, their fruit is more of like a little bit more of a treat, more of a junk food, so we want to make sure they would exclusively eat fruit, but we try not to let them overindulge themselves because we want healthy birds that will hang out with us for years to come.
So what about the little guys flitting around up at the top? What kinds of things do they eat?
So we have a pellet that is nutritionally packed for a lot of different species, but we also provide various types of bugs for different sizes of birds, as well as greens and blueberries and other mixes of fruit that they get on the regular. On top of that, they will get the larger fruit. I tend to have to put it in a little bit of a protected area. I have to kind of hide it so that the curassows don't let all the fruit away from the little guys to do that.
And how many species total are here in the free flight area?
Currently, we have 9 in here. Typically, we'll see 10 or 11 depending on what's going on. We kind of rotate some friends out depending on the breeding season. A lot of these birds are controlled by species survival plans, or SSPs. It's a way to keep track of who's related to who and who should be breeding with who across zoos throughout all of North America. So a lot of these guys, we go by the recommendations of who they should be with, and a lot of times we'll pair them off to be able to breed. So, for example, those curassows are highly recommended. We'd love to have an egg from them, and that's why we do everything we can to get them. But sometimes we end up with some birds who get overrepresented, have either a family member or they themselves have had too many chicks in the past. And so this is kind of sort of the in-between place where they come and hang out and they aren't actively breeding all the time.
So a lot of people are often surprised when they walk into the building and they see birds kind of flying around the public area.
Yes, so we do, especially for those curassows, we do like to open up. There's a nice net here. This is, it's open for the smaller birds at all times. We do have windows open there and they do spend a lot of time. There's a smaller bird that tends to hide away during the day called the sun bittern, who spends most of his time, honestly, out there on the exhibit floor. When we get the option, we give them as much space as they can to fly around, give them as much space as they want to be comfortable. And those curassows are no exception to it when we open this window for them to go hang out. We have another pair of curassows across the way. They like to go visit their cousins. Sometimes they can just be seen out there posing for pictures. They're pretty comfortable during the general time of year hanging out with everybody that's walking around.
So do all the birds tend to go out into the public area, or just a couple?
Yeah, there's a couple of them that frequent more than often than not, and sometimes they'll catch one odds and ends. So all of them will come back in at night. This is a nice, the canopy is where they are safe when it is at nighttime when they need to kind of tune out. That, and because the food is in here, they know that this is a safe place to continue to come back into. So we typically don't have any problems with them zooming back in for the end of the day and resting.
So aside from the free flight area, what other birds can people find in feathers and scales?
We do have a desert exhibit sporting a couple of species that you'd find in southwestern United States, such as the roadrunner or the Gambel's quail. We have the world's largest species of pigeon, the Victoria crown pigeon, a pair of them, named Albert and Megan, hanging out. They're also a breeding pair that we'd be happy to have, though they're fairly newly introduced, but we still have had some egg lays, which is always exciting to take steps in that direction. As well as some smaller birds. We've got various types of fruit dove. Tawny frogmouths are one of my favorites. We have a pair of tawny frogmouths, which are nocturnal birds that you can see hanging out, sleeping.
The Muppet bird.
Yes, the Muppet bird, exactly.
Out of all of the birds that you work with in this building, I know you just said that the tawny frogmouth is your favorite, but which bird do you think has the coolest adaptation?
So I really like I would say, I wouldn't even say the tawny is my favorite specific bird. That guy that I mentioned before, the sun bittern, which he tends to be a little bit more active at night. He's hanging out on the exhibit side, actually. He's on top of the box right
Oh,
there.
really?
He just hid away.
Oh,
That's fine.
of course.
Yeah, naturally. So he's this beautiful bird, long neck and legs, and he's got this awesome coloring. It's hard to say to describe how a brown bird is beautiful, but he's got these like lovely sort of orange shades on the back. And it's interesting to see him both sunning as well as if these guys are defending themselves. They get the name sunbittern because they have this sort of like, it almost looks like a rising sun on the back of their wings. And it's sort of this like, it's sort of meant to be distracting, sort of like that kind of like eyes looking at you sort of vibe to it. But every once in a while, during the day, especially when it's sunny, of course it's a lovely snowy day today, the sunbittern hangs down on the rocks right over there, and you can see him just with his like arms sprayed out in like the most like majestic way. And I think he's a really cool looking bird, and I think he's definitely got, yeah, I love that pattern on him, and just the way that they operate is very interesting. All right. Well, I just want to thank everybody for stopping by in Facebook Live today. Thank you for coming to yet another Bringing the Zoo to You. Hopefully we'll see you back in the zoo someday soon, and have a great one.